So, hello and welcome to my presentation. So, 1 year ago, I was participating in a planning workshop simulation. We created lots of stories and each team used a different color. So, after some time, our wall looked like this. So, next we tried to put all the stories into a relation. In order to do so, we used tape and wool cord strings. So you can imagine that was not always easy, especially it was not very flexible. And also the sticky notes, sometimes they didn't stick. So I thought that teams deserve a more sophisticated tool in order to visualize dependencies. So I'm gonna show you why you'll love the brand new Rational Team Concert widget with safe support for Timebox-based planning. So the Timebox Planning widget is what you see here in the background of this first slide. So my name is Marcus Giacomuzzi and I'm a Scrum Master of a Java application software team, and I'm with Siemens Building Technologies headquarters in Zug, Switzerland. So the question is why I'm here presenting. I'm here because I'm the product owner of this Timebox Planning widget. I developed this together with students and we rolled it out globally within Siemens Building Technologies. So why will you love this Timebox Planning widget? So first, you will love it because you will learn how it supports you in visualizing dependencies between stories and features. Second, you will love it because you will learn how it supports you in planning and tracking the safe program increment. And third, you will love it because you will learn how it supports you in showing the team's resource needs transparently. This is really for Scrum Masters and they really love it. So how is my presentation structured? I start with an introduction to the Timebox Planning widget. So what is it? Then we move to a part called Agile Teams and Systems Engineering. And then we are ready for the Scaled Agile Framework. And I will conclude this presentation with a demo. These two demos are already recorded and are also available as YouTube movies on this channel. So we don't need this slide because we are not going to have any questions during this presentation. So let's start with the first part of my presentation, the Timebox Planning widget introduction. So what you see here looks a little bit like Tetris. And that was also my metaphor because I wanted to have a tool, a widget, which was really simple. And I liked Tetris as metaphor, and you see it looks very similar. You have different colors, you have different shapes. However, the shapes are quite easy. And people in my company, they call it therefore the Scrum Master Tetris. So now let's decorate this picture a little bit. So let's call these colorful boxes stories. And then horizontally, I would like to add the sprints. So we start with the backlog, and then we have sprint 1, 2, 3, 4. And as we have in SAFe, we have the sprint innovation and planning. Vertically, we have the complexity in story points, and an experienced Scrum team also knows its velocity. And what we see here is what we call the Timebox Planning View. So what are the basic features of this Timebox Planning widget? So let's go to RTC. Here we see the RTC dashboard. We see here the Timebox Planning widget on the RTC dashboard. We can maximize this, and then we get this view. So let's start with the basic feature to clone a story. So very often we have big stories or or we have stories we want to continue in the next sprint, so we want to create a clone. And IBM provides a copy function. However, we do also copy all the attributes of the story, and in addition, we also copy the links, so especially the parent-child link type. So we just open the context menu, go to clone a story in the extras compartment, and you will see that you get a clone of the story post-fixed with clone. So that's actually very useful if you have big stories or if you want to continue. Then you can edit and adapt. Another useful feature, sorry for that, is the drag and drop. So just imagine you're in the middle of a planning workshop, Scrum of Scrum, for example, and you have a touch screen and you just would like to move a story to another sprint. So you just grab one and move it to another sprint, and it gets instantly saved. That's very nice and easy. What we also have is a powerful search utility. So you can almost search for any property or any attribute of the story or the work item, and then it gets highlighted if you make a hit. So why do we need this Timebox Planning View? So typically we have a stakeholder, and he would like to know when we can burn down this backlog. So how many sprints we need to burn down this whole backlog. And so how can we do it? Actually, it's very easy. We just have to divide the number of story points in the backlog by the velocity of the team, and then we get the number of sprints. So in this case, we assume to have a velocity of 10, and in the backlog are 30 story points, so we divide 30 story points by 10 and get 3 sprints. So if it is that easy that we can communicate the stakeholder that we are going to be finished by the end of sprint 3, why do we need this Timebox Planning View? So by watching this animation, it's really that easy if you have just one team. However, imagine if there are multiple teams. If you are in a multiple team environment, then it becomes more complex. You have dependencies. So I don't know if you know this book from Cohn called Agile Estimating and Planning, and he states that if you are in a multiple teams environment, then you should have a rolling look-ahead plan. And typically you look forward 2 or 3 sprints in order to make sure the dependencies are working and you are sure that nobody blocks somebody else, so that everybody has enough space in order to plan the stories. So now we are in the next chapter, the agile teams in systems engineering. So the question is, what is systems engineering? So here we have an example from our environment, systems engineering from a fire safety system. So the topology looks typically like this. We have interconnected fire panels up here in the top end of the picture, and each of them has a field bus. And on the field bus are detectors and actors, and the typical use case is that we have a fire somewhere. The fire detector detects this fire, signals that to the fire panel, and the fire panels calls the fire brigade. That's a typical use case. So let's zoom into a fire panel. What do we see here? So, of course, we need to have a team responsible for the hardware and mechanics. So that's one team. And they provide the hardware. On the hardware, we have an operating system, Linux, and we have a Java application software team which writes software for this processor, and they also write JUnit tests for it. In addition, we have some hardware modules, and there is a firmware running on it. We have, therefore, a team, a C++ firmware team, which also writes its unit tests. And since everything is highly configurable, we have a fourth team, a Java configuration tool team, which also writes JUnit tests. That's on Eclipse base. So all four of them have a common goal. And the common goal is the system feature. They all contribute to the system feature. And as soon as everything is implemented, the system test team can test the system feature. So how can we plan this, what we've seen before? So in this example, we have three teams. For example, three agile teams, the team blue, red, yellow. And the project green defines project increments and also defines the deadlines for feature A, B, C, D. So in this example, we have the team blue, which is planning the story for sprint number 1, and obviously there is a dependency that team red doesn't start in sprint number 1, it starts in sprint number 2, and team yellow starts in sprint number 3, and they all contribute to the same feature C. So what are the advanced features of the Timebox Planning widget? So in the picture before, we saw that 3 stories of 3 teams contributed to the same system feature. And that's nice if we have here the release backlog, if we can see which stories belong to the same system feature. And that's a useful functionality, especially in the Scrum of Scrum. And we just have to double click on the story like this. We double click this story, and then we see those 3 stories are highlighted, and that means that they contribute to the same feature. And that's very easy because you just have to double click, and we use this very, very often in a Scrum planning session. Then we also have the cross-hatching functionality. So this one marks a story with a cross-hatch if the story doesn't meet the deadline of the system feature. So, for example, we have here this blue story, and obviously sprint 7 is too late for this story. So what we can do now, we just move it to sprint 6, and now the crosshatch has gone. That means now we meet the deadline of the system feature. On the other hand, if we have a look at the system features, then we also get a system feature crosshatched if at least one story doesn't meet the deadline of this system feature. And since a system feature may have more than one children, we can just go through the menu, and in order to figure out which story or which stories do not meet the deadline. And you see here there is an exclamation mark of this story, and so you know this story is planned too late and cannot meet the deadline of this system feature. So now I think we are ready for the scaled agile framework. So that's the scaled agile framework, and typically we have the team, the program, and the portfolio level, and the Timebox Planning widget can support you in the team and the program level. So let's zoom in, and here you see one more time that agile teams contribute to the same feature either concurrent in the same sprint or sequentially one after another. So let's start with the roadmap. The roadmap is on level program. So if we have a look at SAFe, so how does SAFe define the roadmap? So here we see PI3, that's Program Increment 3, PI4, and PI5. So what you see in these boxes are the features, the system features. And that's how it looks like in SAFe. So this is how it looks like in the Timebox Planning widget. So here on the left-hand side, we have the backlog, and then we have PI1, PI2, and PI3. And you see there are red dashed boxes. That means there are no children below this system feature. And we also have the cross-hatched system features. That means a story doesn't meet the deadline of this system feature. And what is now a typical use case in this roadmap view? A typical use case is that we move a feature from the backlog to a program increment. For example, let's move this feature L to the program increment 3. So next, we can focus on the program increment 1, or just on one program increment. So what do we see here? We see here the program backlog of art green, and we see the current program increment 1. So here you see that the height of the feature is different. Not each system feature has the same height. And this is because we sum up, we add up the complexity, the story points of the underlying children. So what is now a typical use case if we do program increment planning? Typical is that we add some children. How can we do that? We click on the context menu, go to extras, and we create a child item, a story in this case. So now let's go to the team PI planning. And here let's have a look at all teams for a specific program increment, for example. So this is how it looks like in the Timebox Planning View. So you see here now the release plan, and you see different colors. That means different teams are working in this program, for this program increment. Typical use case we have here is that we just double click the story, and you know now what happens. You see the stories which contribute to the same feature. And we highlight the siblings. And this is how we make sure that the dependencies are well defined. And for example, here we have the team yellow and blue. They can work concurrent in the same sprint. On the other hand, team red seems to have a dependency. So at first, we have to implement, or we have to make sure that the team yellow and the team blue implement their story, and then the team red can start with their activities. If you want to show a dependency, a hard dependency, then you can use the native RTC plan with blocks and depends on, and then you get this Gantt chart-like view. So just in case, show siblings is not enough for you if you need to also visualize those dependencies. So now let's have a look at one team, and this is very interesting for Scrum Masters. Here we see just the contributions of one team, of the team yellow. And you see this team has a velocity of 7, and here we can manage the resources. So for example, in Sprint 101, there are still 2 story points available, and so on. And you see also that there are stories planned too late. There are stories planned in Sprint 2.1 which should deliver for a feature in Program Increment 1, and therefore this story is hatched, cross-hatched. And now you should move this story to a sprint 1.x in order to deliver your story for this system feature in Program Increment 1. So now, at the presentation in Las Vegas at InterConnect 2016, there was a demo, and you will find the demos in 2 videos on this channel, on this Timebox Planning channel, one for how to use this widget and one for how to set it up. So what is now next? You can follow this link and then you can download this Timebox Planning widget for free. It's available on this Bluemix channel, and probably you know already that Rational Team Concert is free for 10 people. So you get it free without paying anything if you don't use more than 10 people in your team, for example. And here is the link to the YouTube channel. All new videos will be posted on this channel. And now I hope that I could show you that the Timebox Planning widget with safe support is really as easy as playing Tetris and a real alternative to tape and pull cord strings. So, questions? And the last slide, thank you very much for watching and listening. Bye bye.